Hello, this is Igor Stardoff with the Martinez Historical Society, and this is part of the Society's oral history program. This morning, May 30th, 2019, we're in the home of Jackie and Don Ulrich in Martinez. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning, Igor.
Thanks for inviting us in. Well, let's just jump right in. It's great to be here with you. And I know you have a whole lot of interesting historical things to tell us about. So to kind of set the stage, maybe we could do a little bit of historical perspective, and each of you maybe tell us something about your family's history, and then up to the time when you got together, then you can kind of interrupt each other, talk over each other, talk about how that goes after that.
Yeah, well, that goes way back.
Way back.
So ladies first, Jackie.
History. Don and I were both brought up in Wichita, Kansas. He was not born in Wichita. He was born in far western Kansas in a little town and moved to Wichita when he was 5. We met in high school, and in our middle of our junior year in high school, we sort of became well acquainted and started dating. And that was the start of something that's lasted for an awfully long time.
Wow, how long has it been now?
Well, we went to KU, University of Kansas, together after we graduated, and between our junior and senior year in college, we thought it was a very good idea to get married, and we did.
So what did you see in this guy that
Hard to
attracted you?
say.
You know, a lot of my friends ask me,
She can't come up with an answer.
and I never came up with a very good answer. Oh, he was
Well,
just,
he's aged well. He looks pretty good now.
yeah, I
look
think
a
so
lot better
too.
now than I did then. I was big ears, floppy ears, geeky.
He wasn't either. He was very nice looking. And I don't know, we just hit it off.
Yeah.
We liked each other,
Wow.
and it's lasted. We've been married for 62 years, so something worked.
Yeah. Well, prior to Kansas, can you give us a little thumbnail history of your family? Yeah.
My father was family was brought up in Pennsylvania, and my dad was born in Kansas and was always a Kansan. And he had for years been on the road as a barber and beauty supply salesman during real tough times in western Kansas with all kinds of bad weather, and managed to survive it. And he and mom, on the other hand, came from Nebraska to Wichita. Her dad owned a supply store, a sports store. It had everything in this small town. But during the Depression, they were told that life would be better in Wichita than it was in Nebraska, small town in Nebraska. So Mom was a young woman by that time and working in a department store, and my dad was brought in by a friend because she knew that they would hit it off, and they did. And had a very nice life together. Mom's background was Czech-speaking people. Both of her mother and father came from different parts of the Czech-speaking world. My grandfather from just outside of Prague, south of Prague. My grandmother farther down in the area closer to,
Moravia.
yeah,
She was from Moravia.
she was from Moravia, yeah. So anyway, we had a lot of Czech cooking and talking and all kinds of things that I grew up with. My dad had no part of it, really. He didn't really even kind of like the food all that much, but he ate it. He was a trooper. And we just had a very good family life. My dad ended up buying a bakery, and it turned into 3 different places in Wichita, and he had a very good business. When he finally gave that up and retired, he had a very, very good life. My grandparents lived also in Wichita. My grandfather passed away way too young, and grandmother moved in with us when I was 12 years old. And so she was part of the family and lived till she was 2 months shy of 100. And there's a longevity in my family with the women. My mother passed away when she was 96, and she was living with us at that time. So that's briefly
Well, thanks.
my background.
Could you maybe back up just a little bit more and tell us how your family came here to to America?
My grandparents were tiny children. Grandpa was 10 years older than Grandma. But he came when he was about 5 years old with his family from south of Prague. And Grandma was 3 when she came over. So neither one of them remembered a whole lot of their background.
Do you
But
recall what the impetus was to come here at the time?
life was going to be better
Yeah.
for both families, even though they came at very different times, years apart. But they settled in the same community in Nebraska that was Czech-dominated, the little towns, and they both grew up in that respect. They met and fell in love, and Grandpa really wanted to get married, but my grandmother was a Catholic, and my grandfather was opposed to Catholicism. So he was going up to South Dakota to homestead, and he told her that he would love to marry her, but she would have to leave the Catholic Church. And Grandma couldn't do that. She was very young and very dedicated, and so he went up there, homesteaded for a year. She heard nothing from him, and he returned to their area in Nebraska where they lived, and Grandma told him that she was willing to give up anything, that she was madly in love with him, so they got married.
That's right.
Yeah, and they, as I said, lived in Nebraska until the Depression brought them down to Wichita. And they did a very interesting thing. For a long time, I was kind of opposed to it growing up in my thoughts. They weren't doing it by the time I came around, but I heard enough of it. They started going door to door, buying gold from people in order for the people to have enough money to buy food with during the Depression. And they became kind of, I don't know if you want to call it wealthy, but certainly well-to-do as a result of buying all this gold and selling it. And I guess it was a win-win, but it always kind of rubbed me the wrong way at first until I realized that, yeah, they were helping these people by buying this gold because they were able to buy food for their kids.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting way to grow up, and they were absolutely. I adored my grandfather. He was wonderful. That's their picture up there, Grandma and Grandpa. The small one.
Oh, right here.
Yeah, right there.
Wow, what a handsome couple.
Yeah, they were very, very handsome. He was really very handsome. Anyway, passed away way too early. As I had said, my grandmother then moved in with us when I was 12 years old. And my little brother was just a couple of years old. There was quite a difference between us, and he was my only sibling. So
Okay, so
that's
that
in a
brings you to
nutshell.
Wichita, where you guys met, so
Yeah.
let's give Don a chance to
Yeah.
kind of tell his side of the story here.
Okay. Where do you want to start?
Well,
Way back?
We could start way back and move forward.
All right, that's sure. I know a lot more about the paternal side of my family than my maternal side, because a cousin of mine was a genealogist and studied and found out a great deal about our family that I did not know prior to her working on it. Germanic, an Anabaptist sect called the Church of the Brethren, which was a peace church and opposed to military service, military life. The family was pretty much forced or decided to leave was not Germany then, it was, but in the Saxon region, and moved to Switzerland because they did not want to serve in the military. They left in about 1690 and lived in Switzerland probably 20 years or so. The manifest of the ship they sailed to the United States from was out of London, so they may have lived in London for a period of time also. So they might have been English speaking by the time they got to Maryland.
And where would that have been?
Maryland.
When?
When? 1719. They
1719.
Yeah, that's the manifest. They arrived in just outside of Baltimore. Shortly after that, they moved to southern Pennsylvania and established my ancestor established a mill in that area, and his son joined the Revolution, and was a Revolutionary War soldier. After the war, the mill was burned down in an Indian conflagration of some sort, unknown. So they moved from Pennsylvania to Indiana, Hagerstown, Indiana, where he established another mill, and remained in that Church of the Brethren sect for a long period of time.
So they were members of the Church of the Brethren and all that time?
Yes, all that time.
And that's basically the opposition to war was brought up
Well,
here?
peace church it is a peace church. It's similar to the Quaker and Amish tradition, but a much smaller sect. And in about 1850, my grandfather moved his family from Indiana to just south of Lawrence, Kansas. They were also abolitionists. And Kansas was, so a lot of abolitionist families were moving to Kansas at this time. It was bleeding Kansas. The sort of the hotbed pre-Civil War, where between free soiler and abolitionists and pro-slavery folks were rushing to Kansas because there was a plebiscite to determine whether it would be slave or free state. So that was the reason they moved. Also, it was free land.
So they voted with their feet?
They voted with their feet, they
Yeah.
did. And
And they were,
now-
and
now-
also people got free land in.
yeah, so they had a homestead.
Mhm.
And so they were abolitionists, but they also moved the Indians off of the
Oh,
off of the land. The Kansas Indians that were in that area subsequently were removed or moved to Oklahoma. And
mm.
at any rate, they so he had a farm. Had the opportunity. We had the opportunity to visit that farm, which is still standing and still viable. In 1863, a Confederate officer and thief by the name of Quantrell
Mm.
raided Lawrence and subsequently headed south and went through my ancestors' farm, burning the barn to the ground and torching the house as well, because he was a known abolitionist, and he was also selling hay at a good profit to the Union cavalry. So we had the opportunity to see the house that had been restored, and there was a little picture or a plexiglass showing of the timbers that had been scorched by the fire. Okay, that's and a little aside. It's very near a place called Lone Star Lake, where college students would go to
Discuss political
to
matters.
less
Yeah.
political matters
Yeah.
over illegal moonshine,
Uh-huh.
of course, because Kansas was dry when we were in college. We went there often, not knowing that my ancestors' farm was about 2 miles away from
Mm.
it. Yeah. Okay, where am I? Well, on my mother's side, I know actually very little. They were their roots were in Germany as well, and my mother and father met in Fredonia, Kansas, which is in the southeast portion of the state. My mother was from Missouri, but they met in a business college that they were attending at the same time, and hit it off and were married, and stayed in Fredonia for a while. They moved to St. Joe, Missouri. My dad was in the oil supply business. My oldest brother, Hubert Jr., was born in 1921. My middle brother, Robert, was born in 1926. My oldest brother was the hero of my life. He received a football scholarship to play at Kansas University. He was his senior year all conference, graduated in 1942, 43. Anyway, was commissioned as an ensign in the U.S. Navy and went to training in Rhode Island and became a PT boat commander in the South Pacific. He was proud that he didn't lose a man. He said that one of his men had his pants shot off, which was the closest he came to having any casualties. He returned became a coach, football coach, and became an assistant football coach at Kansas University when we arrived.
We being your family? And
No.
With Jackie
No.
and I started going to college.
Uh-huh.
He was an assistant coach there. He was adamant, that was 1953. Korea was still on. He was adamant that I was not going to Korea.
Mm.
And so he set me up to go into ROTC at the University of Kansas, which I did.
That's the Reserve Officer Training.
Reserve Officer Training Corps. As Jackie said, we had a few, I mean, it wasn't from, high school through to marriage that it was we had a few times when we were not seeing each other. There were two breakups, if I recall, until we did get together. And each time of the breakup, I think at least I was pretty much devastated, and I was not the one that broke up.
You're breaking
Well-
his heart.
She broke my heart twice,
Yeah.
if I recall. That's a long time ago. and so we did get married between our junior and senior year, and upon graduation, I immediately went into. I was ordered onto active duty.
Mm.
This would have been in June of 1957. We went to Fort Holabird, Maryland, to the intelligence school. I became an intelligence officer training, and our first assignment was Fort Riley, Kansas.
Is that nearby?
Which
Yeah.
it's in Manhattan, Kansas, which is Manhattan is 50 miles west of Lawrence, Kansas,
Urlich.
and 130 miles northeast of Wichita.
Mm.
So we were there several years. I talked her into extending, and we went to Monterey to Army Language School.
Okay, before you went to Monterey, that whole time was in Kansas?
It was in
Yeah.
Fort Riley, yes.
Yeah, join the Army and see the world. We
Yeah,
stayed in Kansas.
we went
Came back to Kansas? How did that look to you at that time?
Well, I was kind of glad to go back. We weren't that close to Wichita, but we had a child, and yeah, it was fine
Yeah.
with me.
We went home quite often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For weekends. I mean, it was quite close.
Okay,
So
on to Monterey.
on to Monterey,
Language school? Yeah.
language school, Army Language School in Monterey, and I loved it. I was taking the Czech language. I had chosen Czech. I had a choice of Czech or Polish. I chose Czech because of Jackie's background. I thought it'd be so cool to speak to her grandmother. And it was.
Yeah.
Although her Czech was Nebraska Czech.
Not the
But
same, huh?
we understood each
Yeah.
other, and that was a good enough reason to take the course.
Yeah.
And so after Monterey, I was assigned to Stuttgart, West Germany, with an intelligence
So you
group.
went in the intelligence school in Kansas?
No, in Fort Holabird, Maryland.
Maryland.
Right. We were there 21 weeks,
Yeah.
I believe it was.
Oh, okay, just a little over, less than 2 years. What kind of stuff does intelligence school cover? What kind of subject matter?
Well,
You become very intelligent.
yeah, it really helps your intelligence, yeah. you learn methods, methods of operation, intelligence and counterintelligence, interview techniques, surveillance, you know, all the trade craft that you would expect in an intelligence school. And it was, of course, Cold War time, so the training was obtaining intelligence and countering intelligence efforts of the Soviet Union and the satellites. I was a Cold Warrior. That was, you know, that's what I did. We went to West Germany. I was in civilian clothes. I was a spook, as I told Debbie, and she'd not heard that term, but it's an old CIA term that intelligence officers call each other, spooks. And our mission, in a general sense, I talk about particulars, was as I said earlier, recruiting, training, vetting human intelligence to obtain military type intelligence, order of battle stuff, intent, capabilities, movements of Soviet and satellite military. And that's what we did. I floundered a lot. But it was fun. You know,
It was fun.
it was, because it was, you know, the military, we were in full work. I mean, we weren't getting ready for anything. We were operational. We were doing something. And we felt that we were doing something important. I don't want to, I don't want to negate anything else that, you know, is done in the military, but intelligence is always working. It's, you know, it's not a wartime thing. I mean, it is a wartime, but it's working at all times.
So you don't just go and come back? And
Well, and
Yeah.
training was, we didn't train, we were, you know, we were operational. I don't know if that makes any sense. But it was, I enjoyed it a lot. And we had a very nice life in West Germany at the time, because this was early 60s. We moved when it was 1960. Jackie was delayed slightly because Ike had put a ban or a stop on dependence. That's what they were called in those days.
Didn't like that very much.
On dependence travel to the U.S. It worked out because once I was assigned there, I was sent to Oberammergau, West Germany, to study German. And I returned from there just about the time she was allowed to come over. She and the babies. We had our second was mighty young then.
Yeah.
Under a year.
Yes.
So you were still in the United States when?
Yes.
Yeah, and then the wall went up.
Yeah.
Just after the two daughters and I got there, the wall went up. So things became
tense.
tense.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had our sea rations in a closet.
Bug out gear. We were fortunately going to France.
So in case the Russians attacked, you
Right.
were prepared to evacuate?
Exactly.
You had to keep your supplies
Supplies
together
ready,
so you could
ready
leave
to-
at a moment's
yeah,
notice?
ready.
Yes. And we had our car there. We had our ridiculous car shipped to Germany.
1957 Plymouth
Yeah,
station wagon, a big orange car.
yeah.
And all of wherever we took that car, everybody in Europe would go,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was huge.
Particularly the
I
men and
remember they
little
had the big
boys.
fins
The big
on it.
fins, yeah, of course, yeah.
It was
I
so
love
out
those
of
fins.
so out of place in West Germany or in Western Europe.
Yeah, back then they were small cars all, and
Yeah.
Americans
Yeah.
had the big ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
And we went everywhere with it.
Yeah.
We took lots of trips to Switzerland and
Spain,
Spain and France. Yeah.
France, Paris. We had a great time in Paris.
Yeah. This was all with your kids as well?
Well,
Sometimes.
the trip to Paris was not. Our friends, whom we just had lunch with yesterday. Oh, I'm sorry. I okay? Did I mess it up?
You're okay.
Okay. Try it out again.
It's an anti-surveillance technique.
Well,
suppose,
I'm getting bugged. I'm happy with it.
You know all about that stuff, and interrogations and stuff. How's this one going, by the way?
Well, I'd much rather be asking the questions than answering them. But I mean, you'll have to bear with me. I'm sure I'm meandering.
Anyway, Bruce and Diane, our friends, took
friends.
care of our two children when
Our friends of 50-some years. They live in Sacramento. We saw them yesterday. That's special. You don't have bosom friends from 50 or so years ago, you know. We're still quite close.
yeah. But we had a great time.
We did. We had it was the economy at the time. You know, West Germany was still in recovery, although it was hard to find any signs of the war. It'd been rebuilt by then, but they certainly weren't as economically strong as they became, as the German people became later. So we were, with our meager salary, we lived quite well. We could do most anything. So we did, and we came back in fall of 1964, and I was assigned to a field office, a counterintelligence field office in Kansas City.
So this is catching spooks, I guess.
This was, well, yes, although it was more plain old security type stuff, background investigations, security surveys, security inspections, that sort of thing. Mostly background investigations. And I was, again, in civilian clothes.
And for you, Jackie, you've transitioned back from living in Germany with the particular kind of situation that was, coming back again now to, where was it that you came back?
Kansas City.
Kansas City.
Here again,
Yeah,
Kansas.
well,
We were-
It's like the center of the universe.
Yeah, it was. Always coming home. It was, we had people that we knew there. We had a nice time. Again, I was taking care of my two little girls, and I don't know, somehow the moves didn't bother me. We moved quite often during our early life, and
We weren't there very long.
we were not there very long.
We had decided. We had decided
Good catch.
that a military career was not for me. And in hindsight, now this was 1964. Vietnam was still just a spot. The Vietnam War was not a part of my decision. It was getting out of the military as a career. I had received I had thought about the CIA, the FBI, and the Secret Service, knowing that my intelligence background would be of some advantage. I talked with the Secret Service. It didn't really appeal to me. I talked to the FBI and made an application. Shortly after that, I heard from the CIA that they were interested in me. But by this time, I had pretty much put my hat on the FBI, and it was accepted. February 1965, and went to training in Washington, D.C. in March of 1965. Jackie stayed in Kansas with her parents, so you can maybe talk about that period of time.
Well, actually, I stayed in Kansas City.
Yes, okay.
Yes, our oldest daughter was in school.
Yes, okay.
Well, so was Sherry. They both were, and I did go to visit Don when he was in Washington, and my grandmother came and took care of the girls, and we had friends there. It was okay. It wasn't one of my favorite places that we were, and without Don, but we managed to survive it, as we had a whole lot of things. And I was glad when he came home, and I was glad that we got settled as a family again, which we did. We went to.
So after upon graduation, I was assigned to New Orleans, Louisiana. So this was the summer of 1965, which was it was an interesting time. The Voting Rights Act had just been enacted. The Accommodations Act had been enacted the previous year. The South was in a state of unrest, and we were the enemy. However, the Bureau, in very good, wisely, did not really give any real cases to new agents. They thought if you were going to, flounder, you can flounder on things that weren't. And that made good sense. They don't do that anymore, but I thought, in hindsight, that. So I worked primarily interstate transportation of stolen motor vehicles, interstate transportation of stolen goods. I did conscientious objector investigations, stuff like that. But I got involved in civil rights cases in at least an ancillary fashion, because everybody was doing it. It was, the civil police brutality, civil rights cases, public accommodation, voting rights cases were specials. So you would be assigned with other more experienced agents to work these specials. So that was what we were involved in.
Can you give us maybe a little illustration of what some of those cases were?
Well, what was the gal from the Gazette that interviewed it? That was in Kiwanis that interviewed everybody.
Can't remember.
Yeah. So I talked to. She interviewed me when I was, doing the election stuff for the Kiwanis.
Oh, Diane Callis?
No, that wasn't her name.
No.
She was a cute little girl, and she was very young. So in 1965, the Voting Rights Act was enacted in, I believe, like September, and there was a parish south of New Orleans called Plaquemines Parish that had not had a black voter since Reconstruction. And the parish president said over his dead body was any black person registered to vote. We opened the registration at a post office in in Plaquemines Parish, and we were sent there, a half dozen or so of us, to ensure that that folks would be allowed to register. And the first day, 4 black ladies showed up and registered. Black ladies, no guys. And we assured we were there, everybody knew we were there, and it was peaceful. That was it was a kind of a proud democratic moment in my life. Democracy is only viable and valuable when there is universal suffrage, and I was really pleased to be a very, very small part of that. Enough said.
Well, this connects back to your family's time moving to Kansas in the first place.
Well,
There's a
yeah,
link there,
exactly. Yeah,
don't
it's
you?
political.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
I'd like to say a few things about New Orleans. I didn't have the opportunity to find anything nice about it. We had already moved around quite a bit, had seen quite a bit, and I was appalled at the attitude down there towards people of color. It was shocking to me. I mean, it was hard to comprehend. We lived in a well, frankly, our year there was not our finest year as far as circumstances. We got there and were barely moved in because our furniture took 3 weeks to get there. And Hurricane Betsy hit. And that was a rude awakening. We were in an apartment complex. It was just 2-story. We were on the top story. It was all kind of centered around a pool. It was a beautiful little place. We had our roof torn off and went through our first hurricane together as a family. And everybody was just devastated from it. We were, I'll just make one little brief. We finally went outside after the hurricane had gone over us about midnight, and it still continued to be really ugly. And in the morning we got up and it was just devastating. Everything was a mess. And the whole complex was sort of walking around in a daze, and we had a lot of little kids there and all. And I said, I'm going to go up to, can't remember the name of the place, a donut shop that was a couple blocks from us, and just at least get some donuts or something for these kids to eat. And so I got into one of our cars, which had glass blown out of it and a board shoved underneath it. But anyway, I got out and I went to the donut shop, and it was not there. Nothing was there. It was totally destroyed. It was shocking experience. But anyway, we got through that. But the attitudes down there of some of the people that were actually living in the apartment complex was just I found almost intolerable. It gave me a really, really bad feeling about the South, which I really knew nothing about until then. I'm sorry to have
No, that's
interrupted.
okay.
Well, it's all part of,
Right.
Yeah.
So we were there about 10 months.
mhm.
And I got reassigned to Mont.
So you were there for 10 months,
Right.
and you had a hurricane,
Yeah.
had the Voting Rights Act.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Pretty intense time.
Don's dad died
My
suddenly,
father died
Um,
at that time.
and we had to race back to Kansas, and it seemed to be one catastrophe after the next
So our
there.
experience in New Orleans was not. it, was- it was good in one sense. I did get trained. You know, I
Yeah.
I
Thank you for
learned
the
to
kisses.
understand the job a bit there.
Mhm.
And I got to go back to Monterey for language school
Oh,
in the Czech language.
yeah.
So I went the second time. I had thought I had done okay the first time, but the Bureau seemed to think I needed more
Mm.
language training. So we went back to Monterey.
So from New Orleans to Monterey?
Yes.
And
From-
it turned out to be a lark.
Yeah.
I had a great time because I didn't have to study.
A lot of golfing.
It was pretty easy by then.
It was
for
pretty
you.
easy by then, and I managed to win the Maxwell Taylor Award as the top student in all the languages for that graduation period.
Whoa,
So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Do you have it on the wall somewhere?
it's here somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know, it might be in the garage. So, from language school, we were transferred to New York.
Okay, before you go to New York,
Yeah.
how was it for you, Jackie, going from New Orleans to Monterey?
It was blissful.
Yeah,
Yeah, came back to our people.
yeah.
Loved it. We had
Did you
we
find
had
much of a difference in the way of sort of the general population's attitude towards,
The Californians.
we're California. Yeah, absolutely. You know, people are people and are accepted. I know that's not always true, and it's a nice thing to think about. But yes, it was like coming home.
have you been in California before?
Language
Yeah,
school
in language
the
school
Army.
before
Same-
that.
Same
Yeah.
place, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so this time you with the FBI.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yes, we had a good time. Good time.
We did.
We did a lot, saw a lot, and enjoyed a lot. And then
And then we were transferred to New York. We settled in New Jersey, primarily, I guess, because an Army officer that we had known in Stuttgart, a dentist, and Jackie had maintained contact with his wife, and they touted, northern New Jersey as a spot to go, and we searched for a home there, and liked the area. It's quite gorgeous, forested, green, lush, nice area.
yeah, nothing that you hear about New Jersey was what we found. It was blissful. And of course, Don was in seventh heaven because we lived on a golf course, Ramsey Golf and Country Club. Sounds very highfalutin, but it wasn't. It was lovely.
It's a little 9-hole course, but it was fun.
Now, how old were your kids by this time?
How old were our kids by this time? Sherry, our youngest, was in kindergarten, and Kelly was in the fourth grade.
So all this time with these various moves and stuff,
Yeah.
kids changed
Kids
schools.
changed
and
schools.
Absolutely, yes. And our younger one, Sherry, found it all to be just fun and games. She adjusted well. Our oldest daughter, it was a little tougher for her, and she had kind of a tough time with all these moves and changes and people and so forth.
So time-wise, we probably need to get to Martinez when,
One of these days.
Well, except that once we got to New Jersey, we found out we were pregnant, and we had our son there.
our son
Steve was born.
Was born in New Jersey. And we were there 7.5 years. I was working counterintelligence cases at the New York office of the FBI. It was, again, I enjoyed the work. I had a few, one of my supervisors and I did not see eye to eye on several items. So I moved about a year before we left. I left counterintelligence and went into it was a new squad in the Bureau. It's called squads. Was formed when the Protection of Foreign Officials Act was enacted in 1974 or 75, where it became a federal offense. Foreign officials came under federal law, where it became a federal offense to assault, to murder, to bomb a foreign facility, and so forth. So there was a separate unit established to enforce those laws. So I asked to be transferred to that unit, and last year and a half or so I was involved in that matter. So it was counterterrorism because dissidents that had a beef against a particular government, a particular foreign entity, would do bombings, that sort of thing, against the facilities that were in New York affiliated with the United Nations. I mean, for example, the Soviet Aeroflot was bombed.
It's a Russian airline.
Airline,
National
yes,
airline.
Soviet,
Mhm.
and
Okay.
and the U.S. mission to the United Nations was bombed. The Iranian mission was bombed. The Vietnamese, South Vietnamese observer, they were not members of the mission, was taken over by a homegrown group. Things like that, constantly. In the meantime, I had gone to Redstone Arsenal and was trained as a bomb technician. So when I came back, I was being called out.
It was a bomb technician you would defuse or disarm bombs?
No, we trained people to do that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes, I was
You were a
a
bomb technician
teacher.
Instructor.
I was an instructor, yes.
Yeah.
We had no purview. The Bureau had no mandate for rendering safe devices.
Were you aware of any of your students having gone on and done
Oh
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Were they successful?
And my folks that I went to that class with, I
Yeah.
knew. Yes. So, but I did primarily crime scene investigations, bombing investigations. So I got called out at night all the time. I mean, it was amazing. You think now that was a period of quiet, We had a number of bombings. I can't remember, hundreds probably.
Yeah.
So that was primarily what I was doing.
Sounds like there's a lot of stress in that.
The bureau's a stressful job. I never felt personally a fear. But it was always there. We always made every effort for safety, and the Bureau still does. When you make an arrest, you give it overpowering force. No thought or possibility should enter the arrestee's mind that there's any possibility of escape or resistance.
None of this chasing down the streets.
No,
stuff. Yeah.
not unless you have made a mess of things.
Yeah,
And that makes perfect sense. Nothing fair. What do you want to be fair about an arrest for? At any rate, that last year and a half or so I was involved in that. And we got what's called an office of preference transfer. And we had a little difference of opinion. I really wanted to get out of New York.
I really loved Ramsey, New Jersey. By that time, I had a good job working for a design company. And
So your degree back in college was in art?
Yes.
yes. However, as I was saying, Don and I got pregnant very soon after we were married, and so I did not get my last 13 hours of college, and so I did not graduate from the University of Kansas. And it always bothered me not to have that degree because I had, worked for 3.5 years getting it. Of course, I had something wonderful that I got instead, which was a sweet baby, but we were in New Jersey, and I thought, it's time that I got my degree. Even though I was 30 years old and had 3 kids, we had a brand new college just 20 minutes from us that had just opened up in New Jersey. And I applied there and was accepted, and my credits were realized and accepted. Unfortunately, I had to go for 1.5 years to get my last 13 hours, but I did, and my 2 oldest girls were in school. Steve was still just a little kid. He was 4 when I started. So we would go off to college, and they had a wonderful daycare at the college, and so he would go to school there, and I would go to school, and we both had a great time. And so his first, he'd always tell people that when he finally got into kindergarten, he would say, I go to kindergarten in the morning and college in the afternoon. And we had a great time together. So I got my degree, and went through the ceremony, and just a week after that, our oldest daughter graduated from high school, so we graduated together, and that was delightful. And it was another delight that I had of living where we did in New Jersey. So I had my degree. I got a job in the design company that I was enjoying, and as Don said, I was less enthusiastic about moving than he was, because I was very content with the life that we had there and the friends we had there and my job. And anyway, so it was kind kind of with a tear or two that we journeyed out here. But it didn't take long to fall in love with silly Martinez. You probably might be interested in why we chose Martinez, since Don worked
Coming
in
from
San
New Jersey
Francisco.
to Martinez directly?
Yes.
Yes, yes,
Well,
we did.
That's an
San
interesting
To San
connection.
Francisco.
We're Westerners, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
San
And,
Francisco office, I was reassigned to.
So we had this friend again that we saw yesterday for lunch, was born and raised in Martinez. Her parents owned a laundry downtown. Arno.
Okay.
And so Diane happened to be here when Bruce and Don got out of the Army. Bruce went to Foreign Service, State Department, and
Foreign Service officer.
yeah, and so they had been living all over the world too, a lot in Africa and in different places. And when we got here, Diane was here visiting, and she said, "Well, you have to live in Martinez." And I said, "The last place I will live is in Martinez." It didn't appeal to me that much. Anyway, until we found this house, and we both just fell in love with it right away. And we are, I think Don is as pleased as I am with living in this town. We've had wonderful friends. I had an opportunity to get on the Martinez School Board, and I wish I could remember his name. Golly, somebody had left the area and had a year left to go, so I was appointed by the sitting group to be on the board, and then ran for my office. And I was on the school board for 9 years. Enjoyed it thoroughly, had wonderful companions, made wonderful friends. It wasn't all just fun and games, but I thoroughly enjoyed being there.
What were some of the more notable things that you dealt with?
Well, the reason why I applied to begin with was because I was so upset with the fact that the board had closed Mendocino, because Steve, Montecito, I mean. Our son Steve went there, and his first year that we lived here is where he was in school, and we were delighted with it. He loved it. He adjusted immediately, and then they closed it, and I was very, very upset. So he went to John Sweat after that, and I chose to be on the board because I was going to see the things were done properly. Mm-hmm. I got on the board, and we closed 2 more schools and cut busing. As a result of that, there were most of us, 4 of us, that were
there was a recall.
There was subject to a recall, yes. So we had to go through a recall before I got very far along. We managed to survive that very well, and all stayed on the board. Anyway, I made friends there that became my special friends. And
Maury
Huguet, Nancy Hobart, Jerry Scott, and what was that lawyer's name that used to live here that got this barred?
Yeah. I don't remember, honey.
I don't
and
either.
We won't bring his name up anyway.
Okay, I won't talk about it.
To find out.
I can't remember. Anyway, so we soon became very, very happy with Martinez. Don less so. He was really not a Martinian until he retired, because he was off to San Francisco every morning. So it got to be.
So, closed 2 schools. What were the things that,
Well,
of your,
She's,
go ahead.
What?
well, the high school was, her name's on the plaque for the high school.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
that's
I
what
have.
was
The
gonna get
board
to,
when
yeah.
the-
Yes,
was
yes,
approved.
I was
Yeah,
on
yeah,
the
yeah.
board when we planned for the high school.
Yeah.
When it was actually finished, I was off of the board because I chose not to run third term. But it was very startling. I was certainly invited to the grand opening and sat in the front row with my fellow ex-board members, and looked up, and the nice placard that had all of our names on it from having designed and been a part of this beautiful new school misspelt my name.
It's in bronze now, so it's
It is.
Cast
But
in
Nancy,
Chipped it off.
fortunately, Nancy was still on the board, and she said, "I'll have that fixed." And sure enough, she had it fixed. They had to, if you get a look close, you can tell that it has been scratched out and redone on the bronze.
little spell checker there. You can just picture a cartoon of a caveman doing his spell check.
Gives one the sense of proportion, you know?
Yeah.
What is-
So you were probably able to use your design skills in designing the new high school.
Well, I know I didn't get involved in that respect, but it was a matter of finding the right people to build and interviewing the people that were interested in designing it and approving some of the design work and all. And I'm proud of the job that was done, because I think the high school was done very well, and I'm still very happy that I was a
Obviously, you're
part of
proud
it.
that achievement. Is this
Absolutely.
your proudest achievement during this school time, you think?
Oh, probably so.
Yeah.
Probably so. Yeah, a lot of being on the school board isn't a bundle of fun and joy. You know, there are a lot of people that are upset, unhappy that you have to deal with. We were always in conflict with the teachers because of pay raises and so forth. Fortunately, I've been off the board long enough that most of those people are friends now. But I enjoyed the camaraderie of the group that I was with. We were all very, very supportive of each other, and have remained so.
Yeah, that's good. And during this time, you were commuting to San Francisco?
Yes.
Yeah?
It so happened that the unit in San Francisco was involved in satellite counterintelligence and counterterrorism. So it dovetailed into my specialty. So I was right back, you know, doing things I knew how to do, and it was a nice combination. Still going to bomb the crime scenes, still doing counterintelligence work, until I got kind of a bug somewhere along. I'd always wanted to learn how to fly. So on my own time, I took flying lessons and got my license. And maybe a couple years after that, I had the opportunity to fly for the Bureau. So I became a surveillance pilot the last about 3 years, I believe, of my career, which was a totally different thing, and I enjoyed it. I learned how to fly by, you know, I got a lot of flying experience, and enjoyed the job, and that's what I retired from. I was a surveillance pilot until I retired, out of Alameda Naval Air Station.
So you flew a lot of, I don't know, suppose following suspects around, or what kind of thing?
The airplane is a wonderful surveillance platform. It's primarily for vehicles. It's almost impossible to make. You're out of sight. You're 3,500 or 4,500 feet above the surface, and there's always something distinctive, or almost always something distinctive enough about the car that you could follow it.
Something like an orange Plymouth, maybe?
With some big orange in it, and you get skilled at it.
Yeah.
And you can even do it at night.
At night?
Yeah.
Use infrared?
No.
No?
Just, of course, the technology. They probably use drones now. Once again, I was replaced by nobody. But it was just eyeball. Two pilots. I think they use a pilot and an observer now because they're short of pilots. But this is a heavily regulated airspace. So we had to be in constant contact with the controllers, and we had a specific ID that they knew who we were, and we would tell them when we became operational. Idaho 62 operational. So then we had priority. The big jets and everybody else had to avoid us. So one would be observing the vehicle moving. The other pilot would be maintaining altitude and looking out for other aircraft, and be in voice contact with the controllers. That was pretty much the operation. It was fun. It'd get old making donuts in the sky when you weren't operational. You're just up there, a flying platform. But for 3 years, I had a great time. It was a totally different mindset. When I was off duty, I had no, I wasn't writing reports in my mind and thinking what I was I was through. And that was kind of a nice feeling. It was a transition. I got ready for retirement, I guess.
Did you start riding bicycles around that time?
No, I was running. I did a lot of running. And I ran after I retired. In fact, that's how I got involved with the National Park Service. I was running on Mount Wanda.
Right over here?
Right over here.
Yeah.
Before and after it was acquired by the Park Service. And I had to sneak on because it was closed.
Mm-hmm.
So I went over to the site, John Muir National Historic Site, and spoke with the superintendent, whose name was Phyllis Shaw. And I said, Phyllis, why aren't, you just got this property, why is it still locked up? And she said, I have no staff, nobody to patrol it, no way to control what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I'll volunteer. I can be a volunteer patrol. And she thought that was a pretty good idea. Put my name in to the Park Service, and they came back and said, when did he leave active service with the Bureau? And it had been less than 2 years. they said, he's eligible to transfer as a law enforcement officer with the Park Service. So I did. And I worked as a part-time, strictly part-time, seasonal law enforcement ranger at the John Muir site from 1991 to about 2002. And I did all sorts of different types of patrols up there. You like to recall one time when you were working in Muir Meadow, and I came down on the ATV and looking very self-important, I believe is the way you put it.
Very scary, actually.
And I pointed out to you, I think that was about the only time I ever used that ATV. But you've mentioned that on more than one occasion.
Well, made an impression.
Yeah. I guess the best part of that little stint that I had was that we made, 3 trips, 3 details. I was detailed to Denali National Park on 2 summer seasons. And Jacquie joined me on both those occasions. The first time I was in backcountry, we were in a one-room cabin with no facilities.
No running water.
No running water,
No lights.
Electricity. We did have propane, which ran our fridge and heat and cook stove. And we did have a porta potty. The porta potty was our excess. I mean, that was we felt really good. Lucky that we had a porta potty.
As far as showering, when it was still warm, I threw a bag over a tree out back. That was my shower.
Yeah.
We loved
Nothing
it.
but grizzly bears for company,
Yes,
so it's all right.
Well, but it was a campground.
Yeah.
There was a very small campground, 7 or 8 spots.
And they weren't always occupied, but quite often.
But there was plenty of woods.
Yeah.
Plenty of cover.
And I just found it I had no fear whatsoever after a while, and Don would be off on the road for hours, and I'd take long walks, and never encountered a bear, never encountered any kind of wildlife that was unpleasant or bad to me. And it was a beautiful setting, and it was just gorgeous. And one of my favorite things about our first year was that Don came home about midnight one night and said, "The lights are out, but I'm going to bed." And by that he meant the northern lights.
Yeah.
And even though by that time it was cold, when we got there it was hot, and 3 months later it was snowing. So we had 3 seasons in 3 months. Anyway, it was very cold out. I got in my sleeping bag and my lawn chair and sat out there for a couple of hours. And I remember telling people that I still dream about that, because it was so gorgeous to sit there and watch those lights. And you could hear the sounds, a buzzing sound. It was quite interesting. And it was fascinating. It was still one of the highlights of my life. So that was great. Out there all by ourselves, 14 miles away from any civilization, any part of civilization, and it was a delight.
Yeah, Denali is a magnificent place. It is truly spectacular.
Yeah, I had the opportunity of standing on the road and picking up a tour bus that was going by, or there are two different kinds of buses, but anyway, they would pick me up, and so I would go out and journey out farther into closer to Denali, and it was a wonderful experience. Second year, we went back, but we stayed
In the headquarters area.
there, and in order to have housing, I had to work. So I was at the visitor center, and I manned the phones, and that was quite wonderful. Had a good time. We really liked our 6 months in Denali.
I could see you would make people feel really welcome in the visit.
Well, it was the phone calls were very interesting. They were from all over the world.
Yeah.
You know, people that could barely speak English would ask me questions. And it was just very interesting work to do. And then I always sent out the daily bulletins in the morning telling them what the weather was going to be like and all of that kind of stuff. So it was fun.
When she was doing all that cool stuff, you were out patrolling the back roads?
Road patrol, right.
Yeah.
There are not that many roads, but
Yeah.
yeah, doing just normal ranger law enforcement stuff, telling people to stay away from bears and
One road.
yelling at speeders and all sorts of things. And of course, emergency medical runs. There was there was a fatality. Anyway, injuries, and the nearest doctor was in Fairbanks, 120 miles away. There was a physician's assistant in Healy, which is a town near, right at the entrance to Denali. Normal, and we had 2 ambulances. The normal EMS would be to provide. We had 3 park medics. Would be to do first response, stabilize as much as possible, get them to the either to a spot where a helicopter could come in and pick them up and take them to Fairbanks, or to the clinic in Healy, depending on the triage, whatever the story was. But EMS runs were probably have 1 a week of injuries. A lot of folks visit Denali in the summer and with requisite problems. It was I wouldn't call it heavy duty law enforcement, but it was fun. I enjoyed it very much. Then the third trip was to Washington, D.C. After 9/11, I was detailed to the Department of the Interior headquarters and was involved in communication, 9/11 type situations, where, as you recall, the 9/11 Commission said one of the problems was that the different agencies in the federal government were not communicating with each other about counterterrorism matters. The way I put it is that before 9/11, nobody was talking with anybody. And after 9/11, everybody was talking with everybody ad infinitum. You know how responses are knee jerks. So everybody was just being more than happy to tell everybody else what was going on. So you needed people to shuffle that information around, and I was detailed to do that for a 3-week period. And Jacquie came to join me. We stayed at a Marriott hotel in D.C., and I was working a graveyard shift, so we had daytime, we had daylight, and we visited everything in D.C. we managed to get to all of the museums, all of the monuments, everything in the city. It was it worked out well. It was a lousy job.
Mm.
I didn't like the job. It was, make work stuff, but we had a good time.
And that was all the time when you were still based in Martinez now, right?
Yes, that was a detail.
And your kids?
That was 2002.
And your children were, by then, were grown?
Gone, yeah. We, let's see, Steve graduated in 86. Sherry graduated in like 78. She graduated from Alhambra. They both graduated from Alhambra High.
When we moved here, Kelly had already been to a year of schooling, and she was going to a small college in Pennsylvania, and didn't want to stay there, so came out here and transferred to Sonoma State. And both of the other two did graduate from Martinez, and so we were childless. Yeah, Sherry was around for a while.
So I retired in January 1990, and a month or so later, Glenn Cottrell came by and said, you might enjoy going to Kiwanis. Will you come to Kiwanis with me? And I said, yeah, sure. I did, and it was a good fit. I joined immediately. It gave me a chance to get to know Kiwanis Martinez and more about Martinez and more about the people in Martinez, because I had been a commuter, with not all that much contact with local folk. And I've enjoyed my my time in Kiwanis immensely. Jacquie joined in about 6 years ago, and we're both members of Kiwanis. That's where I met Igor, although I do remember him from the time that he when I was on the ATV and he thought I was a kind of, I don't know. He was anyway. But I remember Igor, and he won't remember this event, but I did. I was in the office at the John Muir National Historic Site, and Igor came walking in and said, I want to look at the maps of Mount Wanda, and I want to look at the drainage system. And I thought he was just kind of a supercilious, know-it-all.
Things went downhill from there.
Yeah, he just went downhill from there, yeah. But I came to realize that Igor is a passionate conservationist and a jack of all trades, and with wide and varied interests. And he's a person I admire, and I just wanted to say that because we've had our we've hiked together for quite some, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so, and when you're shucking a backpack with another guy, oh my, sorry, we forgot that phone. It's a robocall, I'm sure. Oh.
The phone that won't die. Huh?
Thank you, dear. Yeah. When you're shucking a backpack with a guy, you learn a lot about it. Wouldn't you agree?
I would say so.
Yeah. Good and bad. And so I feel I know Igor pretty well. And I'm not surprised he got lost. I haven't told him.
We had to bring that in, didn't we?
I hadn't told him this, but he has. I think it's probably tempered now. a penchant for getting off the trail to save 3 steps and 100-foot elevation change. And I know that's what happened. I was not on the hike that Igor got lost. I'm sure everybody knows about that because Igor.
That's a whole nother subject.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Yeah, we're not talking about.
Oh, that's
Igor
right.
and
This is your interview.
No, I had to throw that in. Igor's one of my favorites. Well, we're 84 and 83.
83.
We've lived a long life. We've had our ups and downs. We've come to a place in our relationship that is special. We care for each other, both emotionally and physically.
He's my best friend.
And we're best
And it
friends
took
now.
me a while to figure that out.
Yeah, and we talk like we hadn't. We weren't. I don't know. We talk about our feelings more than we used to. We're soulmates now. This is the best part of our married years. We see the, the light at the end of the tunnel. We're growing old. I think we're growing old gracefully. And I love this woman with all my heart. She's my soul.
Pretty nice to hear.
She's my soul.
We've got it recorded now.
And I think maybe that'll be it for our interview.
Do you have any last words you want to offer?
I agree with everything that he just said. We are very, very much our best friends.
So take a deep breath and enjoy this moment. And I think that's the end of the interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.